One of the questions I get asked most frequently on my Instagram and sometimes on my YouTube channel, but especially on my Instagram, I get a lot of messages from people that say, I really want to get into real estate investing, whether it's flipping, whether it's investing in rental property, whether it's investing in Airbnbs, but financially, I don't know how to make the steps to get there to purchase my first one. And it's like anything. Once you buy one, you save that money, you reinvest it, you get the ball rolling, and you can invest it in more. But the first one is usually the biggest hurdle. So today I'm going to talk to you about what it actually takes to get started. Honest answers. Not that it's easy, not that it's fun and kitty cats and rainbows, but the actual honest truth. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about some tangible, actionable steps and processes that may actually work for you if you want to get started and you're not really sure what method may work for you to get your foot in the door. So the honest truth of it all is you have to get your financial house in order. You have to have some capital to put in the game. If you're going to buy an investment property, you most likely need to have a down payment. You at least have to have a good enough credit score where somebody will loan you money. You need to have a little bit of money saved for the renovation. There's different strategies. For example, if you buy a house and you live in it and you're fixing it while you live in it, you still have to have the money to put into that property, and you have to have the ratios. If a bank is going to loan you money, they're going to require that your income to your debt is within a certain percentage ratio before they'll even consider giving you a mortgage. So you need to get your financial house in order. If you want to go buy a property, but you're going out every night, spending a bunch of money on crazy frivolous things that are going to just be fleeting and go away, you got to get that together. If you have a lot of debt you have to pay off, I've talked about before, when we started out, we had a lot of student loans that we had to get squared away, and that was a big hurdle for us to overcome. And I know a lot of people are going to say, not everybody can do that, that's so hard. It is hard, but it's worth it. You just have to make the right steps and changes to get yourself to where you want to be. And you sometimes you have to ask yourself, is what I want to buy right now, or this thing I want to do right now, is this short, tiny moment of happiness worth my long-term goal of where I want to be in 5 and 10 years? And it's really hard when it takes a long time, because it's not like you can turn it around in 3 months in most cases, unless you're a really, really high earner. A lot of times you have to make a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan, whatever it may be to get to where you want to be. So the first thing, you guys, is you just have to get your financial house in order. Did you buy a car that you probably shouldn't have bought, and maybe you could be driving a used car? Is your car payment as much as a mortgage, and so you can't get a mortgage? Things like that. Those are things you really need to think about. So first of all, you got to get your financial house in order before you can even get a loan. And sometimes that means, when we started out, my husband was in law enforcement and I was a juvenile probation agent, and our income was not high. And on top of that, we had a really, really, really high minimum student loan payment. So to even dig ourselves out of that hole, we had to find a way to pay our minimum payment on student loans. And on top of that, we had to find a way to pay extra so we could get them paid off faster. And so for me, with the jobs that we had, I knew that I had to find a way to earn more money. And that meant either finding another job, which I later did, but at that time it was a side hustle. So I started, I fortunately had construction skills, and I had a really good mentor that taught me a lot of stuff about renovation. So I got my contractor's license, and I started doing, tile and flooring and bathrooms for people on the side. But on top of that, I also was selling on eBay like crazy. I did my full-time job, and then all night, my husband worked night shift a lot because he was in law enforcement. So I would take pictures and sell stuff on eBay. I went to the post office multiple times a day to get stuff shipped out. So the first thing was just finding a way to meet your expenses and then save a little bit of extra money so you can put that aside for what your next step and your next goal was. So for me, because I knew long-term I needed to find a higher paying job, but my midterm was I need to find a side hustle. So while I have this job, I can be bringing in extra income. So it's not easy. And sometimes the plan, when you write it all out and you look at the numbers, might be, I need to find a different job, or my goal needs to be a different job, or my goal needs to be, hey, maybe I have multiple jobs. I really can't think of a time in my adult life where I didn't at least have 3 jobs at a time. And whether it was a job in my own businesses, there was always multiple streams of income coming in, and it wasn't easy. It was just finding solutions in the gaps. So that's your first step. Is you might have to suffer for a couple years to get to the point where you can start the steps of where you want to be. Tangible solutions may look like something like this. And you may have heard of some of these methods, and some may work for you and some may not, depending on what your goals are. So number one is to buy a home and fix it up, buy a home that's not the nicest, most fixed up home, and renovate it while you live in it. And then the goal when you move out is to hold on to that property as a rental property and then buy a second property. But the thing with that is you have to have a high enough income or enough of a down payment for the next property that when you move to the next property, a bank will loan you on the second one without you being required to sell the first one. Most people, when they upgrade their home, they sell their other home, they use the equity for the down payment in the next home. If your financial situation is such that you can afford to be lent on both of them, you can keep the old home and you can keep it cash flowing as a rental property, especially if you fixed it up. And then you buy the next home and your first house became your rental property. A lot of people do that is they get started in a starter home and they buy and they upgrade. Or what we did, I think our first home we bought, fixed it up while we lived in it. It became a rental property. Then the next home we bought, here's another strategy, was a multi-unit. So then we bought a triplex. Literally the only reason we bought this house was because it was 3 units. So we knew we could live in 1 unit, we could rent the other 2 units. The other 2 units rent actually covered our mortgage on the front unit. And so we were, for the whole thing, we were able to save that money to then invest in the next property. And so our plan was we had the 1 rental, we bought the triplex, we lived in 1 unit, rented 2 units, plus we had the old house as a rental. Then when we were able to save enough to buy another house, then that whole 3 units became rentals. And then we had 4 rental properties. And buying that multi-unit really set us ahead. Here's the really cool thing about buying a multi-unit property. If you buy a home to live in it, and the same with buying a house and moving out of it, renting it, and then buying the next house, if you buy a home to live in it yourself, there are loan programs that are more favorable than if you buy an investment property. If you buy an investment property, you're looking at putting about 20% down, and then you're gonna have a higher interest rate too. If you buy a home to live in it for yourself and then you move out of it, there's usually a parameter, like you have to live in it for a year or 2 years. Make sure you understand so you're not violating your loan terms. You still have those same great terms, but then you go buy a different home and you didn't have to put 20% down. So that's a big hurdle to savings. Same thing with the multi-unit. You can buy up to a 4-plex with a traditional loan. If you go above 5 units, it becomes a commercial loan, which higher interest rates, stuff like that. But if you buy a 4-plex, you don't have to put 20% down. So for instance, if you qualify for a VA loan, you could buy a 4-unit property, live in 1 unit, not put any money down, and have the income from the other 3 units. Once you've lived in it long enough to satisfy that term, then you can go on and buy another property, and then you have 4 cash flowing units. It's a really cool way to not have a mortgage. It's like if you buy a house and it has a basement apartment and that covers your mortgage or a portion of your mortgage, it really covers a big portion of expenses for you. And so, for instance, another example is when we bought it with an FHA loan. But because we lived in 1 unit, with an FHA loan, you can do as little as 3.5% down. If you bought it and didn't live in it, you would have to come up with 20% down, which just makes it take longer for you to save the money to be able to make that investment. So 2 specific strategies are to plan on, I'm gonna live in a unit, I'm gonna fix it up, and then when I move, I'm gonna keep this unit and buy my next property. But again, you have to keep in mind the money has to balance out and you have to make a plan for your income to make that work. The next option, which I think this is the easiest one, is to buy a multi-unit and live in a portion and rent a portion and have that income coming all the time. And then when you move out, it's more income because it's an additional unit. And this doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be like ours was a triplex. It doesn't have to be like a 4-plex. Even if you can buy a home that your zoning allows for you to add a basement apartment or anything like that, where you can have some portion of income coming on the property that lessens the blow of the mortgage you have to pay, to where you can either be saving more or paying off debt faster to be able to get to that next step. Here's another strategy. Some of you that are asking me about how to get started are contractors and you have the skills to renovate a property. I was talking to a guy, and I've known him for a while, but I was talking to him down at the building department the other day, and he renovates houses. And he told me when he started out, he had some partners and they put the capital in to purchase the properties. And I think they mostly flip. I think they maybe have some rentals, but he had the skills. He was the craftsman. And so he was able to bring that to the table. And I don't know how the partnership balanced out, and that's something you can negotiate. But if you have something to offer as a tradesman, you could say, okay, you put the money into somebody who has the money but doesn't have either the time or the skills. You're putting the work in, and you have clearly defined goals in the partnership, because partnerships are tough sometimes, about this is how much this person's doing, this is how much this person's doing, here's our timelines and our expectations. But you, if you had the skills as a craftsman, you could do all the work and someone else could put in the money. So that's something to think about too. I think it's hard because we see all these programs online. There's always someone trying to sell you something, and there's people that say, oh, I'll teach you how to invest in real estate with none of your own money and other people's money. Once you get established, for instance, I don't know if you know who, there's a channel called Rob Built, and he is a Airbnb investor. Once you show a proven record of investing and successful returns, people will want to invest with you because people want to invest in things that they trust and they're comfortable with. If you have never flipped a house, if you have never invested in a rental property, if you have never invested in an Airbnb, why would somebody risk putting their money into faith in you, right? So I think all these people that are saying, I do all these investments with other people's money, it's probably because they have a proven track record, and that's generally not how you're going to be able to start out unless you have a family member that really loves you or somebody that has a lot of faith in you and some disposable income. So really, you have to get your financial house in order, and I mean house by like your personal situation, and maybe find a side hustle, maybe find an extra job to save for that down payment. Or again, if you're going to live in the house and buy another one, you're higher income, so your debt to income ratio is higher, so you can buy the next property and keep the old one. Or really consider multi-units. I think that's a great way to get into property investing. Here's another solution, guys. If you have a property already and your municipality allows it with the zoning, something you may want to consider is an ADU, or an additional dwelling unit. Now, I'll get into these longer on another video, but basically an additional dwelling unit is you have a big lot, and you, because of the size of your lot, would be allowed to add another property. So like a tiny house on your property, or an additional small casita on your property. You got to check with your city. There's going to be, probably depending on the size of your city, a lot of zoning that's going to say whether that's allowed or not. But if you already have the land and you can add something small that's not a huge expense and make income off of it, you could do that for a long time and save all that income before you go and put it into something else. It might just be a little bit easier way to get into it than buying a whole house to start. So something to think about. I know this was a real quick synopsis, but I hope it was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, please put them below, or message me, and I'll try to get back to as many as I can. As always, thank you for watching this video. If you took the time to watch it and it was helpful, I'd super appreciate if you hit that subscribe button wherever it is, depending on the placement on this video. Like this video and share it with your friends. And hope you guys have a beautiful day. You're working towards your goals, and you're taking the steps today to get you where you want to be tomorrow. So see you later.